Well, guys, I'm Jana Crouch, and I'm the Associate Director for Admissions here at Arkansas Tech, and I'm also an instructor in the Leadership Studies minor. And I also want to introduce you to Dr. Jeremy Schwehm. Dr. Schwehm?
Oh, hey, my name is Jeremy Schwehm. I am an associate professor of organizational leadership, and I help coordinate the leadership minor. So if you do have any questions about the leadership minor after this session, you're more than welcome to reach out to me or to Ms. Crouch, and we'd be happy to answer any of those questions for you. I'm going to turn it back to you, Jana.
All right, guys, I want to, whoops, I'm already clicking things I don't need to be. I want to see if you guys are comfortable, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourselves, because I'd like for each of you to introduce yourselves so we can hear your name. And I want you to also share what high school you're coming from and what major or what program you plan on studying when you come to Tech.
I'll go first then. My name is Sierra. I'm coming from J Fair High School, and my major is Hospitality Food Service Management.
Awesome. Thanks, Sierra. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Randy Carroll. I'm Randy Carroll, and I'm majoring in finance, and I'm coming from Foreman High School.
Awesome. Thanks, Randy.
I'm Marquise Vasquez, and I come from Conway High School, and I'm a vocal music education major.
Hey, Marquise. Good to see you again.
Yes,
Glad you're joining.
I do remember going to Time Out for Tech, and honestly, I think Time Out for Tech was what kind of gave me the little extra boost on, yeah, I'm going to Tech, so.
Yes. And me, of course, right? I mean,
yes,
obviously. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right. Who else do we have?
Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
My name is Heather Lawson. I am actually not graduating from high school because I did in 93, I think.
Cool.
Awesome.
But I am trying to start a new career with Parks and Recreation with an emphasis on interpretation. And I thought maybe this leadership stuff would be something I could use to my advantage. So I thought I would join in today.
Awesome.
Absolutely. So nice to meet you.
I was looking at the list of participants. I think we're close to everyone.
Okay, well, if that's everybody, then I'm going to quickly just go into the curriculum of the Leadership Studies minor and kind of what you can expect if you declare this minor, because we'd really like for you to add this on. The first thing that I want you to know is this is an interdisciplinary program, which means that no matter what you want to study, I heard finance, I heard Parks and Rec, I heard hospitality, vocal, no matter what you want to go into, this will pair well with it. It's going to give you skills that complement what you're going to learn academically to go into the career fields that you're interested in. So from an academic perspective, the minor is an 18-hour program. So this would be an additional 18 hours. 12 of those hours are core lead classes. There's 4 core lead classes, and I'm going to talk about each of those here briefly in just a second. But there's also going to be 6 hours of elective. So depending on your major, you may already be taking one of the classes. It may be built into your program anyway. So it really may not even be a full 18 hours in addition to what you'd already be taking. So let's go ahead and get into the courses. So the first class that you would take in the Leadership Studies minor would be the intro course, which is Lead 1003. And in this course, this is an overview of leadership. We talk about leadership theories. We talk about the history of leadership and kind of the evolution of how we've looked at leadership and how that has changed. But the biggest thing that we do in the intro class, and the reason why I love this class so much, is you as students would do a lot of self-reflection. If any of you guys have ever taken, a Facebook quiz or a BuzzFeed quiz, and it, tells you what kind of coffee you are or what kind of candy bar you are, things like that. If you enjoy that kind of thing, you will like this. There's a lot of academic basis to it. So we do there's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of study and research that has gone into these assessments that you're going to take that will give you some insight into why you think the way you do, and why you might act and react to other people the way that you do. So the biggest thing that we do in that class is a lot of self-awareness and self-assessments. We also do a lot of other awareness. So you learn more about other cultures, diversity and leadership, different ways to look at it, how you can lead a group of people who come from a completely different experience than you, and how you can be a good follower to someone who may not understand your own experience, things like that. We also touch on the topics that we will study in depth later on, but kind of give you an intro to ethics, leading in teams and groups, things like that. Dr. Schwehm, do you want to add anything to that description of the intro class?
No, I'll just reiterate that it is, I think you will learn a lot about yourself in this class. And even as instructors of this class, you get to reflect on how you are as a leader. So I learn things from students in this class as we go through it and learn more about ourselves. And it really is a good starting point for this whole minor. It's difficult to lead. It's difficult to understand how you make decisions if you don't really think about that. And this class gives you the opportunity to not only think about it, but to work through some of these things with everyone else in the class. It's one of those classes that at the end of the class, not only will you learn more about yourself, you'll be very connected to everyone else in the class because it's a very shared learning experience.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I have yet to teach a section of intro in the past 3 years that students have not walked out of the class with new friends that they didn't have before. I think last semester, or the last time I taught the intro class, everyone wrote their Instagram and Twitter handles on the board before they left so they could all follow each other, which I've never seen in a different class. And the students had said they'd never quite done that in another class. So it's a great way to meet people, especially your freshman year and as you're trying to build a network of people on campus. So after the intro class, we get into more specific in-depth topics. And the first one is ethics and leadership. And if you're anything like me, you're thinking, why on earth would I need a 3-hour class to talk about ethics? Do the right thing. It's not that hard, right? Well, the problem is, what about when you have to make a decision and both choices are right? Then what do you do? Or what about you have a decision and your only 2 options are going to hurt somebody? It's going to put someone at a disadvantage. How do you make that decision? And so we will talk about some of the different ethical perspectives. We'll talk about ethical decision making. Does anybody watch The Good Place? Show of hands. Has anybody seen the show The Good Place? Yeah, so Chidi, love him. He is an ethicist, and so he is constantly trying to get Eleanor Shropshire, something like that, to be a better person and make good decisions, and for her to understand that it's not just black and white. We'll talk about things like the trolley problem. We'll talk about, what would you do? Because we think we know what we would do, but when we get in that situation, it might be a little bit different. We'll do some real life case studies, and some of the examples I put up here, I put them up here because they were some of the best discussions in class. Next semester, we're going to have new, more relevant, more recent case studies. But we talked about the Ashley Madison hack. So that's, for those of you who don't know, if that was before your time, that's a website where people could go, married people could go and seek someone online to have an affair with. And this group of online hackers threatened to expose all of them if they didn't shut the website down, and they didn't, and they exposed all of the users' information. So it's kind of like one of those Robin Hood situations where it's like, we've got something that wasn't great going on, but then somebody did something illegal to stop it. What are our ethical decisions here? We talked about corruption in FIFA and how they decide where the World Cup's going to be. Anybody watch the Netflix documentary about the Fire Festival? What a hot mess that was. We can talk about the ethical dilemmas of that guy and the guy that was over the Fire Festival. The ongoing situation in Flint, Michigan with their lack of clean, potable water. So we talk about we talk about specific real things that are going on, but the best part is it's not lecture with the case studies. You are talking with your peers about what your reaction is, what you would do, what you think the ethical situations are. In those classes, Dr. Schwehm and I like to sit back and have you guys do the talking, and we might ask a question here and there to nudge the conversation. but this is very student-led. It's very discussion-based. We're not going to stand up and preach at you. We want you to actually be leading the conversation, because I say this in every class, you will actually learn more from each other than you will ever learn from Dr. Schwehm and I. It's more, you will learn so much from each other and hearing those different perspectives. Dr. Schwehm, what would you add about the ethics class?
I think you said it all really well. It's very hard to get me to shut up and move to the side in classes, especially when we talk about ethics, but this is really a fun class. And it's one of those things when you start the class, for most students, when you get in there, they worry it's going to be boring and it's a bunch of content that you have to read, but it really is. It's probably my favorite class in this whole minor, because there are many occasions when you look at a situation, you're like, I can't believe people did that. I would never do that. But then once you start really delving into it and learn more about it, you can kind of see where the decision making runs off track. You have some people who are obviously unethical and making unethical decisions, but more often than not, you have people who believe they are ethical who end up making unethical decisions. So it's fun to read about that and realize how, and this is one of the big takeaways my students tend to get, and I get a lot, is we're all capable of a lot of things, whether we realize it or not. And the way to avoid making unethical decisions is to study it. And to, again, this is another class that has a lot of self-reflection. It's hard to make a decision if you don't know where your decisions are coming from. So it's another way that you can really learn about yourself. And you have gut reactions to things, but where do those gut reactions come from? And how does that impact your decision making?
Absolutely. So the third class is my personal favorite, Leadership 3003. This is Leadership Skills Development and Group Dynamics. And the reason that I love this class is, at this point, you've had our intro class, you've learned about leadership, what that means, you've learned about yourself and what kind of leader you can envision yourself being. You've learned a little bit about how other people and their approach to leadership, how when you might otherwise clash, you've learned how to better navigate that. So in this class, we dive even deeper into that. And the best part is, nobody pass out. You're all sitting down, right? You will actually lead some of the team building activities. So in our intro class, we'll do a lot of team building. It helps you get to know your peers, and it's why by at the end of the class, you're all basically friends, because you learn a lot about each other. But in this class, you will actually either come up with, or I can help give you some examples of team building activities that you yourself will lead and facilitate, because it's completely different to watch and walk people through a team building exercise than it is to participate in one. So as leaders watching, trying to accomplish that goal of what you're trying to build, I love, love, love this class for that reason, because I see students grow exponentially from the beginning to the end of this course. The other big thing that you do in this class is you design and plan a leadership development training program. So I actually ask students in groups to design an 8-hour training program for student leaders. And you have to come up with what types of things should they learn based on what I've learned about leadership. What would be an effective way to do that based on what I've enjoyed in my experience? So you get to call the shots, you get to design it and present it. It's almost kind of like a Shark Tank presentation where you're pitching it to the class to decide who, what we think we could get behind. And this class is all based on the 5 practices of exemplary leadership. And so everything will kind of come back to that. And then the last course is Lead 4003, which is our capstone course where you will actually do some leadership internship experience hours. Now, of course, nobody freak out about that. And of course, with COVID-19, we are definitely being adaptive and creative in how we're going to approach that for this coming year. And as incoming students, you guys would not necessarily have to, you're not going to have to worry about this for a little while, but we are very understanding of different situations as they arise, and we will work with you. But the main thing is we want you to have some ownership and some experience that you can then take into your hospitality and hospitality degree, that you can take into your Parks and Rec degree, that you can take into your vocal degree, if you're going to lead a choir, into your finance, if you want to work in a corporation, different things like that. So since we've got a little bit of time, Dr. Schwehm, do you want to add anything else about the courses, and then we can do our activity real quick?
No, the one more thing I want to add is this is a very developmental program. Leadership it's not something that you're born with. It's not, you don't have to be the most vocal person, the loudest person to be a leader. What this program allows you to do is to identify your strengths and your weaknesses And what we really capitalize on or try to capitalize on and focus on are your strengths. One of the misconceptions about leadership is you have to develop your weaknesses. Really, it's more beneficial if you build on the strengths you already have. So you, anyone, when you start this program, by the end of this program, you will address those weaknesses just by being in the program. But I think you're going to find that you'll be able to identify your strengths that you already have as a leader and build on those. And I think you'll be a lot more comfortable in your ability as a leader and in assuming leadership roles in any walk of life after you go through this leadership minor.
Okay, so since we've got a little bit of time, what I'd like for you to do is kind of humor me. I want to give you a taste of what we do in the intro class. So we're actually going to go through kind of a abbreviated version of an assessment we actually do in the intro class that we do in Lead 1003, and it's part of a portfolio that you put together. So this is called the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument. And so this was developed by a guy who actually used to be an engineer at General Motors, or I'm sorry, at General Electric at GE. And he decided that he could not figure out why people who seemed to be so intellectual and so smart could do things that made no sense. And what he found was people tend to use one quadrant of their brain. So he split it into these 4 different quadrants. And so what I'd like for each of you to do, can everyone see my screen? Can everyone see this? What I want each one of you to do, look at each of these quadrants and think about yourself and see which one you think best describes you. And you may see 2 that you're kind of torn between. That's good, that's normal. But I kind of want you to focus on one, what you think best describes you. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do this. So if each one of you will look at each of these quadrants A, B, C, and D, read the descriptive words and see which one you think describes you the most, and we can talk about that.
I'm going to make it difficult for you to think, and I apologize for this, but one of the best exercises is to do the HBDI at the beginning of class, and then to do it again at the end of class when you all know each other really well, and you can see your classmates across the room when you separate the quadrants, and you're like, oh yeah, you are that person. You are. For me, I'm always quadrant A, and when people look at me, they're like, oh yeah, I know that's who you are. So that's very interesting.
Has everybody had time, and I'm kind of trying to look at the chat as I can, has everybody had time to kind of read through these and pick a quadrant they think best describes them? Okay, does anybody want to share? Dr. Schwehm just shared that he tends to be quadrant A. I tend to be quadrant C, leaning a little bit D, but I'm primarily quadrant C, which means that typically Dr. Schwehm and I would conflict on a lot of things, but we actually can complement pretty well in situations like the leadership classes. Does anybody want to share what their quadrant is?
Miss Crouch, we're almost like the same. That's why we get along so well.
I know, it was just meant to be.
I was split between C and D.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Those 2 are very related. A and B tend to be very related, but that does not, and we'll get into that in a second, but does anybody else want to share theirs, their primary?
I was complete. Oh, he can go.
No, you can go, yeah. I can wait.
I think I was between C and B.
C and B, that's really good. So yeah, trying to be more practical, but a little bit relational too. Absolutely, that's great. What do you think is your more dominant of the 2?
C.
Okay. All right, who else wants to share?
Yeah, so I think I'm mostly A and also leaning towards D.
Leaning towards B? Those 2 go very well.
No, I mean A leaning towards D.
D. I like that one. Those are like,
so like I'm kind of like a problem solver and a realistic person, but in the same time, like I'm kind of creative and risk takers, like a big risk taker.
Yeah.
And that's where I am too. I'm an A with some C tendencies there also.
With my experience, I feel that I'm an A, but have some of the strong C qualities as well.
Okay, anybody else want to share? Whoops, anybody else want to share?
I'm probably more A than
More
anything.
A? Okay. And one thing that I have noticed in my classes is a lot of times you will see it be fairly weighted gendered. And it's very interesting because I'll see a lot of my male students gravitate toward A, and I see a lot of my female students gravitate toward C. And so it's very interesting. So the whole point of this exercise is for you to realize if you can identify what your dominant quadrant is, but understand there are 3 other quadrants, and depending on the situation, you may need to use one of the other ones. So, you know, you that have your quadrant A, but you tend to lean D, that's awesome, because depending on the situation, you may be a little, depending, you know, if it's a high risk situation, you might be a little more analytical. Whereas if there's not as much that could go wrong, you might be a little more experimental. So depending on the situation, knowing that you can change quadrants, but the goal of leadership and the goal of the class is to know what you're dominant with, but to use all 4 and to understand when you need to use each quadrant. And it's kind of like practicing to write with your left hand. It may never feel right, but you can get better at it. So one of my favorite quotes, and just kind of talking about this with our awareness of our dominant thinking style, Anais Nin wrote, "We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are." So the other important thing about this assessment is if I'm a C and I understand that my colleague, Dr. Schwehm, is a quadrant A, that tells me something about him, that he is going to tend to be more objective and technical about something, whereas I may be thinking about, he's going to think, no, this is what we need to do, it's black and white, whereas I may be thinking, oh, but how are people going to feel about that? How are people going to react to that? And so that can be a good balance where you can help each other fall into being too far on one end or the other. So it's just, we start with our self-awareness, because we can't be a good leader until we know who we are, but then we really build on that leading us to understand other people and how we can relate to them. Dr. Schwehm, do you want to add anything?
No, and I was just gonna say, at the end of the day, all of this is about building relationships. And one of the key aspects of being a leader is the ability to build relationships. And that's what you will do in these classes. And that's what we'll encourage you to do around campus. And that's what we'll encourage you to do in your personal and professional life, is to use the skills that you have to build relationships for positive change.
Does anybody have any questions?
All right. Well, it looks like we're just right at the end of our session. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Dr. Schwehm and Miss Jana, for kind of talking about the minor. I'm really bummed that we didn't have this when I was an undergrad student. One last plug for all of you students. At the end of this week, we're going to be launching our app. So just make sure at the end of the week to download the app. That way you can still stay connected and just keep this communication going with other students. So, but if y'all don't have any other questions, please feel free to message Dr. Schwehm or Miss Jana if you have any other questions about the leadership minor. So thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day.
It was nice to meet and see you guys.
Nice to meet everyone.
Bye.
Bye.